The flames licked at the night sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the rolling hills of Arizona Territory as Willow Reed watched her life crumble into ash. The homestead that had taken 3 years to build was now nothing but embers and charred timber. The heat still so intense she couldn't approach what remained of the front porch where her father's rocking chair had stood just hours before. Her knees gave way, the parched earth scraping her palms as she fell, a guttural sob escaping her throat that seemed to echo across the empty landscape. It was 1884, and Willow had just turned 22 last month. Her parents had succumbed to fever last winter, leaving her alone to manage their modest cattle ranch outside Jerome. She'd managed well enough until tonight, when a lightning strike had turned her world to cinders while she was in town gathering supplies. Now, as dawn approached, the devastating reality settled upon her. Everything was gone: the house, the barn, the winter stores, the family Bible with generations of births and deaths recorded in faded ink. "Miss, you all right?" The voice startled her. Willow hadn't heard anyone approach over her own weeping. She turned to find a tall figure silhouetted against the fading firelight. As he stepped closer, she made out the features of a man she recognized vaguely from town, one of the hands from the neighboring Elkhorn ranch. "There's nothing left," she whispered, her voice raw. He crouched beside her, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Saw the fire from the ridge, rode as fast as I could." His gaze traveled over the destruction before returning to her face. "Name's Wade Evans. I work for Mr. Thornton at Elkhorn." "Willow Reed," she replied automatically, though they both knew introductions were a formality in a community as small as Jerome. Wade stood and offered his hand. When Willow didn't take it immediately, he kept it extended, patience etched in the lines around his eyes. "I know this seems like the end, Miss Reed, but it ain't. We'll start again with what's left." She looked up at him, confused by the we in his statement. They were strangers, after all. But something in his steady gaze made her reach for his calloused palm. As he pulled her to her feet, Willow felt the first fragile thread of hope take root amid the devastation. "There's nothing left," she repeated, gesturing to the smoldering ruins. "That ain't true," Wade said firmly. "Land's still here, you're still here, and come sunrise we'll see what else survived." He pointed to a cluster of trees where her small herd of cattle had gathered, frightened but alive. "See there, already found something worth saving." Willow stared at the cattle, then back at the cowboy, whose confidence seemed so out of place in the face of such complete destruction. She didn't understand why this stranger was offering help, but in that moment, she didn't have the strength to refuse it. "Dawn's coming," Wade said, nodding toward the first hint of light on the horizon. "Let me take you to Elkhorn. Mrs. Thornton will fix you up with a place to stay until we sort this out." "I can't impose, ain't imposing when it's offered freely," he interrupted gently. "Out here we look after our own." "I'm not one of your own," Willow said, wiping at her tear-streaked face with the back of her hand. Wade's expression softened. "Anyone trying to make a go of it in this harsh country is one of us, Miss Reed." He gestured to his horse. "Now, will you come, or would you prefer to argue until the sun's high?" Despite everything, Willow found herself almost smiling at his directness. She nodded once and allowed him to help her onto his horse. As they rode away from the ruins of her home, she couldn't stop herself from looking back, memorizing the sight of everything she'd lost. "Forward, Miss Reed," Wade said quietly. "Always forward." The Thorntons' ranch house was the largest building Willow had ever entered, with its sturdy pine beams and river stone fireplace that dominated the main room. Martha Thornton, a stout woman with graying hair and kind eyes, took one look at Willow's soot-stained dress and tear-streaked face and immediately set about making her comfortable. "You poor dear," she clucked, leading Willow to a chair at the kitchen table. "Wade, fetch some clean water from the pump, and tell Henry to prepare the guest room." "I don't want to be a burden," Willow protested weakly. "Nonsense," Martha replied, already pouring coffee into a heavy mug. "The good Lord commands us to help our neighbors. Now drink this, and I'll find you something clean to wear." Willow's hands trembled as she accepted the coffee. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She had no home, no possessions beyond the clothes she wore, and precious little money. Her parents' ranch had been modest, but it had been her legacy and her future. Now that future was as uncertain as morning mist. Wade returned with a basin of water and set it before her. "Mrs. Thornton's right," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "You'll stay here until we figure things out." "Why are you helping me?" Willow asked, unable to keep the question inside any longer. "You don't even know me." Wade considered her question seriously before answering. 5 years back, I rode into this valley with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Mr. Thornton gave me work when others wouldn't, taught me that a man's worth isn't in what he owns, but in what he builds." He nodded toward the window, where the first true light of dawn was breaking. "Reckon it's time I passed that lesson along." Before Willow could respond, the heavy front door swung open and Samuel Thornton entered, his weathered face grave beneath his silver hair. He nodded to Willow, then turned to Wade. "Rode out to the Reed place. Fire's mostly out, but there's nothing left of the house or barn. Managed to round up about 20 head of cattle that's scattered. Got the boys penning them with ours for now." "Thank you," Willow said, her voice small. Samuel Thornton removed his hat and sat across from her. "Miss Reed, I knew your father. He was a good man, honest and hardworking. Whatever help you need to get back on your feet, you'll have it from the Elkhorn." Fresh tears welled in Willow's eyes. "I don't know where to start." "With rest," Martha interjected firmly. "Everything else can wait until you've slept." As Martha led her to the guest room, Willow caught Wade's eye. The compassion she saw there made her throat tighten with emotion. She didn't understand why this man and his employers were so determined to help her, but in that moment, she was too exhausted to question it further. The room was small but comfortable, with a patchwork quilt covering the bed and curtains that matched the pale blue sky outside. Willow sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, running her fingers over the clean fabric of the nightgown Martha had provided. "I'll be just down the hall if you need anything," Martha said, pausing at the door. "Try to rest, dear. Things often look different after sleep." When Martha left, Willow changed into the nightgown, her movements mechanical. The events of the night replayed in her mind as she lay down, the shock of seeing smoke on her return journey from town, the frantic ride to reach home, the helpless horror as she watched flames devour everything she loved. She thought sleep would elude her, but exhaustion claimed her almost instantly. Her last conscious thought was of Wade Evans and his confident words, "We'll start again with what's left." The next few days passed in a blur. Willow spent much of it in a daze, caught between gratitude for the Thorntons' hospitality and overwhelming grief for all she'd lost. Wade had ridden out with several hands to assess the damage more thoroughly and salvage what they could. The news he brought back was a mixture of small mercies and harsh realities. "Foundations still sound," he reported over supper 3 days after the fire. "Stone chimneys standing too. We found your father's strongbox in what's left of the root cellar metals warped, but the contents are mostly intact." Willow's heart leaped. "The deed to the land," Wade nodded, "and about $40 in cash, plus some jewelry I reckon was your mother's." It wasn't much, but it was something tangible, proof that her past hadn't been completely erased by the flames. "We've got your cattle sorted and counted," Samuel Thornton added. 23 head survived. "It's not the 35 your father reported at last year's tally, but it's enough to start rebuilding your herd." Martha passed a basket of biscuits. "The Ladies' Aid Society is organizing a donation drive on Sunday. The whole community wants to help Willow." Willow stared at her plate, embarrassed by their charity but grateful beyond words. "I don't know how I'll ever repay everyone." "That's not how it works out here," Samuel said firmly. "When Tom Peterson broke his leg last winter, you and your pa helped his family with their harvest. When the Wilkins baby took sick, your mother sat up nights so Sarah could rest. We're just returning the favor." Wade had been quiet for most of the meal, but now he cleared his throat. "Been thinking, Mr. Thornton. With your permission, I'd like to help Miss Reed rebuild her place." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "You've got duties here, Evans." "Yes, sir, and I'll see them done. But I figure I could spare evenings and my day off. Some of the boys said they'd pitch in too." Samuel exchanged a look with his wife before nodding slowly. "Reckon we could adjust things around here to spare you for a spell. If Miss Reed wants your help, that is." All eyes turned to Willow. She looked at Wade, studying his face for any hint of pity or obligation, but found only sincerity in his gaze. "I would be grateful for your help, Mr. Evans. But I insist on paying fair wages once I'm able." Wade's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "We can discuss terms later, Miss Reed. For now, let's focus on getting you a roof over your head before winter sets in." The following Sunday, Willow attended church in Jerome wearing a borrowed dress from Martha Thornton. The small white chapel was filled to capacity, and Willow felt every eye upon her as she slipped into a pew beside the Thornton family. Pastor Miller's sermon focused on the story of Job and the restoration that follows suffering, and Willow felt the message was directed specifically at her circumstance. After the service, the community gathered in the churchyard where tables had been set up for the donation drive. Willow was overwhelmed by the generosity of people she'd known all her life, but had never fully appreciated until now. Families who had little to spare brought what they could: blankets, cooking utensils, preserved foods, clothing, and tools. Clara Wilson, the shopkeeper's wife, pressed a parcel into Willow's hands. "My Thomas and I want you to have this. It's not much, some fabric for curtains and such, and a few things for your kitchen when you get it built." Sophia Martinez, whose family ran the small cafe in town, brought a basket filled with bread and preserves. "My grandmother says a home isn't a home without good food to fill it." Sheriff Daniel Patterson approached with his wife, Rebecca. "Willow, Rebecca and I have been discussing it, and we'd like you to stay in our spare room in town until your place is rebuilt. The Thorntons are good people, but they're a fair ride from your land, and you'll want to be closer once construction begins." Willow looked to Martha Thornton, not wanting to seem ungrateful for their hospitality. Martha smiled warmly. "It's a sensible offer, dear. You should take it." As the afternoon progressed, Wade appeared at her side, carrying a small wooden box. "Found this at Miller's General Store," he said, handing it to her. "Thought you might have need of it." Inside the box was a journal with a leather cover and a fountain pen. Willow ran her fingers over the smooth surface, a lump forming in her throat. "Figured you might want to write things down," Wade explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "My ma always said that putting words to paper helps make sense of life when it seems senseless." "It's perfect," Willow whispered, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of his gift. "Thank you." Wade ducked his head in acknowledgement, then gestured to where several men were gathering. "Some of us are riding out to your place tomorrow to start clearing debris. If the weather holds, We might even get the foundation measured for rebuilding. I want to help, Willow said firmly. Wade studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Didn't expect otherwise. I'll come by the sheriff's place at first light. That evening, Willow moved her few possessions to the Patterson home in town. Rebecca Patterson was a quiet woman with a practical nature that Willow immediately respected. She showed Willow to a neat room with a small writing desk beside the window that overlooked the main street of Jerome. "It's not fancy," Rebecca said, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." "It's more than I could have hoped for," Willow replied honestly. Left alone, Willow opened the journal Wade had given her and began to write. She recorded everything that had happened since the fire, the kindness of strangers and friends alike, and her own jumbled feelings about starting over. When she finally set down the pen, she felt lighter somehow, as if putting her thoughts to paper had indeed helped her make sense of the senseless. Just as Wade had suggested, true to his word, Wade arrived at the Patterson home before sunrise the next morning. Willow was ready, dressed in work clothes borrowed from Rebecca that were a bit too large but serviceable. They rode in companionable silence as the eastern sky brightened, painting the desert landscape in shades of gold and rose. As they approached her property, Willow braced herself for the sight of the ruins. In daylight, the destruction was somehow both better and worse than she remembered. Better because she could now see clearly what remained: the stone foundation, the chimney, a few outbuildings that had been far enough from the house to escape the worst of the flames. Worse because the morning light hid nothing of what she had lost. "Ready?" Wade asked quietly. Willow squared her shoulders. "Ready." Throughout the day, men from town arrived in 2s and 3s: storekeepers, ranchers, miners from the copper operations nearby. They worked methodically, clearing away burned timbers and salvaging what could be saved. By midday, the foundation stood clean and ready for new construction. Willow worked alongside them, ignoring the blisters forming on her palms as she sorted through the debris of her former life. She found fragments of her mother's china, a half-melted candlestick that had belonged to her grandmother, and, miraculously, a small metal box containing daguerreotypes of her parents on their wedding day. Wade found her sitting on a stone, staring at the images. Without a word, he sat beside her, offering his canteen. Willow took a long drink before passing it back. "They would have liked you," she said suddenly. Wade looked surprised. "Your parents?" Willow nodded. "My father valued hard work and honesty above all else. My mother believed in kindness, especially when it was difficult to give." She traced the outline of her mother's face in the picture. "They taught me how to survive out here, but I never thought I'd have to do it without them." "You're not without them," Wade said gently. "Everything they taught you, everything they believed in, that's still with you. Fire can't take that away." Willow studied his face, noting the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into the sun, the small scar on his chin that probably had a story behind it, the genuine compassion in his expression. "How did you get so wise, Wade Evans?" A shadow passed over his features. "Made enough mistakes to learn from them, I suppose." Before she could ask him to elaborate, he stood and offered his hand. "Come on. There's more to be done before sundown." By the time the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, the site was cleared and the foundation marked for rebuilding. Thomas Wilson, who had experience as a carpenter before opening his store, had drawn up rough plans for a simple cabin that could be expanded over time. "We can start on the frame tomorrow," he explained to Willow. "With enough hands, we might get the walls up by week's end. Roof'll take a bit longer, but we'll have you under shelter before the first frost." As the men began to pack up their tools and depart, each stopping to bid Willow good night, She felt a surge of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This was what it meant to be part of a community, to be held up when you couldn't stand on your own. Wade was the last to leave, loading his tools onto his horse with methodical precision. Willow approached him, suddenly shy. "Thank you for organizing all this." He shook his head. "Didn't organize anything, just mentioned it to a few people and they did the rest." He secured his saddle bag before turning to face her. "These are good folks, Willow. They remember how your family helped them in hard times." "And what about you?" Willow asked boldly. "What makes you ride out at dawn and work until dusk for someone you barely know?" Wade was silent for so long that Willow thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. 5 years ago, I rode into Arizona territory with blood on my hands and a bounty on my head. I'd made choices I couldn't unmake, hurt people who didn't deserve it, was running from the law and from myself." He looked out over the land, his expression distant. "Mr. Thornton knew what I was the moment he laid eyes on me. Could have turned me in, collected the reward. Instead, he offered me work and a chance to become someone different." Willow's breath caught. "You were an outlaw," Wade emphasized. "That man died somewhere on the trail to Jerome. Samuel Thornton and this land gave Wade Evans a second chance." His eyes found hers, intense and searching. "So when I say we'll start again with what's left, I'm speaking from experience, Miss Reed." His confession hung in the air between them, changing everything and nothing at the same time. Willow realized that she should feel afraid or at least wary of this man with his mysterious past, but instead, she felt a deepening connection to him. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said simply. Wade nodded once, then mounted his horse. "I'll be back tomorrow. Try to rest tonight, Willow. Building a life takes strength." As she watched him ride away, Willow thought about second chances and fresh starts. Perhaps Wade Evans understood better than anyone what it meant to rise from the ashes of a former life. That night, in her borrowed room at the Patterson home, Willow wrote in her journal about Wade's revelation and her own surprising lack of judgment. She had been raised to believe in the clear distinction between right and wrong, law-abiding and lawless. Yet here was a man who had crossed that line and found his way back, who now embodied the very values her parents had instilled in her. Life, it seemed, was more complicated than she had been taught to believe. As she blew out her candle and settled into sleep, Willow wondered what other revelations awaited her on this unexpected journey of rebuilding. The following weeks passed in a flurry of activity. True to Thomas Wilson's prediction, the frame of Willow's new cabin rose quickly, each day bringing visible progress. The structure was smaller than her family's original home, but solid and well-designed, with large windows to capture the desert light and cross breezes. Wade was there every day, arriving before sunrise and often staying long after the other volunteers had departed. Willow worked alongside him, learning to notch logs and raise beams, her hands growing calloused and strong. They developed a rhythm together, anticipating each other's movements and needs with increasing familiarity. In the evenings, they would often sit on the partially completed porch, sharing a simple meal prepared by one of the town's families and watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. During these quiet moments, Willow began to learn Wade's story in fragments: his childhood in Missouri, his time riding with a gang in Texas, the incident that had sent him fleeing northward, and finally, his redemption under Samuel Thornton's guidance. In turn, she shared her own history, the journey west with her parents as a child, the struggles and joys of building a life in the harsh Arizona territory, her dreams of expanding the ranch her father had started. Wade listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed his understanding of ranching and his appreciation for her ambitions. As October gave way to November, the cabin was nearly complete. The walls stood firm, the roof provided shelter, and the stone fireplace drew properly, filling the single room with warmth against the increasing chill of the desert nights. What remained was largely finishing work installing the windows Thomas Wilson had ordered from Prescott, hanging the door, sealing the gaps between logs with mud and straw. On a crisp Saturday morning, Willow stood in the center of what would soon be her home, overwhelmed by how far they had come in such a short time. The room was empty of furniture, but Rebecca Patterson had helped her sew curtains from the fabric Clara Wilson had donated, and they hung cheerfully at the windows. "What do you think?" Wade asked from the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag after finishing the last coat of sealant on the exterior walls. "It's perfect," Willow said honestly. "Different from before, but perfect in its own way." Wade crossed the room to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You've done good work here, Willow." "We've done good work," she corrected. "I couldn't have managed any of this without you." A hint of color appeared on Wade's cheeks. "You'd have found a way. You're stronger than you know." Willow turned to face him fully. "Maybe so, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I'm glad it was you who saw the fire that night." Something shifted in Wade's expression, a softening around his eyes that made Willow's heart beat faster. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, but instead he took a step back, breaking the spell. "Samuel's offered to help move your cattle back tomorrow," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "Thought we might set up a temporary corral near the creek until you can rebuild your barn come spring." Willow nodded, trying to hide her disappointment at the change in subject. "That sounds sensible. I should thank him properly for everything he's done." "The Thorntons are hosting a dinner tomorrow night to celebrate your return to your land," Wade informed her. "The whole town's invited. It was Martha's idea, sort of a housewarming." "That's very kind of them," Willow said, though the thought of being the center of attention made her uncomfortable. Wade seemed to read her thoughts. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. I could tell them you're too tired from the move." Willow shook her head. "No, I'll go. These people have given me back my life. The least I can do is break bread with them and express my gratitude." She looked around the cabin once more. "Besides, it will be nice to celebrate something after all this work." Wade studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're a remarkable woman, Willow Reed." Before she could respond to this unexpected compliment, he turned and headed for the door. "I'll be back at dawn to help with the cattle. Try to get some sleep tonight, your first night home." After he left, Willow stood in the center of her new house, processing his words. Home. Despite the newness of the structure, despite all that had been lost, this place was indeed becoming home again. And somehow, Wade Evans had become inextricably linked with that feeling of belonging. That night, Willow slept on a pallet on the floor of her new cabin. The house creaked and settled around her, its sounds unfamiliar yet comforting. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky, the same stars that had witnessed the destruction of her old life and the birth of this new one. In the morning, she awoke to the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Dawn was just breaking as she stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the chill, to find Wade leading a small procession from the Elkhorn Ranch. Samuel Thornton rode at his side, followed by half a dozen ranch hands driving Willow's cattle before them. "Morning, Miss Reed," Samuel called as they drew near. "Thought we'd get an early start on getting these critters settled." Willow hurried inside to dress, then joined the men as they constructed a makeshift corral using salvaged fencing and freshly cut timber. By midday, her cattle were enclosed in their temporary home, grazing contentedly on the winter grass that grew along the creek bed. "It's a good start," Samuel said, surveying their work with satisfaction. "Come spring, we'll help you get a proper barn raised." "I can't thank you enough," Willow began, but Samuel waved away her gratitude. "No need for thanks between neighbors. Just remember to pass it along when someone else needs a helping hand." He glanced at Wade, who was adjusting the gate of the corral. "Evans tells me you've got a knack for ranching. Says you know more about cattle than most men he's worked with." Willow flushed with pleasure at the compliment. "My father taught me everything he knew. Said there was no reason a daughter couldn't run a ranch as well as a son." "Smart man, your father," Samuel nodded approvingly. "Well, I should get these boys back to Elkhorn. There's work waiting, and Martha will have my hide if we're late for tonight's celebration." He tipped his hat to her. "Until this evening, Miss Reed." As the Elkhorn hands prepared to depart, Wade lingered behind. "I thought I might stay a while," he said, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. "Help you get settled." Willow couldn't help but smile at his transparent excuse to remain. "I'd like that." They spent the afternoon making the cabin more livable, constructing a simple bed frame from lumber, left over from the building project, arranging the few pieces of furniture that had been donated by townspeople, organizing the kitchen supplies that Martha Thornton had insisted Willow take from the Elkhorn Ranch. As the sun began its descent, Wade built a fire in the hearth while Willow prepared to change for the evening's celebration. She had just retrieved her best dress, another gift from the women of Jerome, when a knock sounded at the door. Puzzled, she opened it to find Wade standing on the porch, his hat in his hands and a nervous expression on his face. He had clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was combed neatly, his shirt freshly pressed, and he wore a waistcoat she had never seen before. "I thought I might escort you to the Thorntons this evening," he said formally, "if you do me the honor." Willow felt a flutter in her stomach at the significance of his offer. In the small community of Jerome, arriving together at a social gathering sent a clear message about their relationship. "I'd be delighted," she replied, matching his formal tone while her heart raced. "Would you mind waiting while I change?" Wade's relief was palpable. "Take all the time you need." When Willow emerged from behind the privacy screen a short while later, she was wearing a dark green dress that complemented her auburn hair, which she had arranged in a simple but elegant style. Wade's expression as he caught sight of her made all the effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Willow smoothed the unfamiliar fabric self-consciously. "The dress is from Clara Wilson. She insisted green was my color." She was right. Wade offered his arm. "Shall we?" The ride to the Elkhorn Ranch was filled with a new tension, not unpleasant, but charged with unspoken possibilities. Willow was acutely aware of Wade's presence beside her, the occasional brush of his arm against hers as their horses navigated the familiar trail. The Thornton home was ablaze with light when they arrived, lanterns hanging from the porch rafters and warm light spilling from every window. The sound of laughter and conversation greeted them as Wade helped Willow dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Martha Thornton met them at the door, her round face flushed with the heat of cooking and the excitement of hosting. "There you are. Come in, come in. Everyone's been asking after you, Willow." Inside, it seemed that half of Jerome had gathered to celebrate. The furniture in the main room had been pushed against the walls to create space for the crowd, and tables laden with food lined one side of the room. Someone was playing a fiddle in the corner, the cheerful tune providing a backdrop to the hum of conversation. As Martha led them through the crowd, Willow was overwhelmed by the warmth of her reception. People she had known all her life and others she had only met since the fire approached to congratulate her on the completion of her cabin and to express their happiness at her homecoming. Sheriff Patterson raised his glass in a toast when he saw her. "To Willow Reed," he called, silencing the room, "who reminds us all what it means to persevere in the face of adversity." "To Willow," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Embarrassed but deeply moved, Willow felt Wade's hand settle at the small of her back in a gesture of support. She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. As the evening progressed, Willow found herself constantly aware of Wade's location in the room, even when they were separated by the flow of conversation. Their eyes would meet across the crowded space, and she would feel a jolt of connection that left her slightly breathless. After dinner, when the tables had been cleared and the fiddle player was joined by a man with a guitar, Samuel Thornton announced that there would be dancing. Couples quickly formed as the musicians struck up a lively reel. Wade appeared at Willow's side, extending his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Reed?" Dancing was not something Willow had much experience with. Social gatherings in Jerome were infrequent, and her parents had not been particularly interested in such frivolities. But she placed her hand in Wade's without hesitation. "I should warn you, I'm not very skilled at this," she admitted as he led her to the center of the room. Wade's smile was reassuring. "Just follow my lead. It's not so different from the work we've been doing together, finding a rhythm, anticipating movement." He was right. After a few awkward moments, Willow found herself relaxing into the dance, letting Wade guide her through the steps. His hand at her waist was steady, his movements confident without being demanding. When the music shifted to a slower waltz, he drew her closer, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. "Where did you learn to dance?" she asked, curious about this unexpected skill. A shadow passed over Wade's face. "In another life," he said quietly. "Before." He seemed about to elaborate, then shook his head slightly. "It's not important now." Willow wanted to press for more, but the intensity in his eyes stopped her. Whatever memories the dancing had stirred, they were clearly painful. "Thank you," she said instead. Wade looked puzzled. "For the dance, for everything," Willow clarified. "For seeing the fire that night. For saying we could start again when I couldn't see a way forward. For working alongside me every day. For—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "for becoming someone I can trust with my future." Wade's steps faltered slightly at her words. The music continued around them, but they had stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the room while other couples swirled past. "Willow," Wade began, his voice rough with emotion. But whatever he intended to say was interrupted as Samuel Thornton approached, clapping a hand on Wade's shoulder. "Sorry to interrupt, but I need to borrow Evans for a moment," he said, seemingly oblivious to the tension between them. "Got word from Prescott about that bull I've been trying to purchase. Want your opinion on the bloodlines." Wade looked torn, but Willow nodded her understanding. "Go ahead. I could use some air anyway." As Wade reluctantly followed Samuel to his study, Willow made her way outside to the porch. The night air was crisp with the promise of winter, the stars overhead brilliantly clear in the desert sky. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold but in an attempt to contain the emotions swirling within her. She had not intended to speak so openly to Wade about her feelings, had not fully acknowledged them to herself until the words were already spoken. Yet now that they had been given voice, she could not deny their truth. Somewhere amid the ashes of her old life, she had found not just a new beginning but a new kind of hope, one embodied in a man with a troubled past and gentle hands who had shown her what it meant to rebuild. "Thought I might find you out here." Willow turned to find Wade standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the light from inside. He stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. "Samuel get his bull questions answered?" she asked, attempting lightness. "Eventually." Wade moved to stand beside her at the railing, his shoulder nearly touching hers as they both gazed out at the night. "Willow, about what you said earlier." "You don't have to say anything," she interrupted quickly. "I spoke without thinking." Wade turned to face her fully. "No, you didn't. You never speak without thinking. It's one of the things I admire about you." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I've been fighting my feelings for you since the night of the fire." Willow's heart began to race. "Fighting them? Why?" "Because you deserve better than a man with my past," Wade said simply. "Because I came to your aid as a neighbor, not with any expectation of this." He gestured between them. "Because taking advantage of your vulnerability would make me no better than the man I used to be." "Is that what you think you'd be doing?" Willow asked, a hint of anger coloring her tone. "Taking advantage?" Wade looked surprised at her reaction. "Willow, no," she interrupted firmly. "Listen to me, Wade Evans. I may have lost my home, but I haven't lost my ability to know my own mind and heart. What I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or vulnerability. It has everything to do with who you are, the man who works from dawn till dusk without complaint, who treats every living creature with respect, who sees possibility where others see only ruin." She took a step closer to him. "I don't care who you were before you came to Jerome. I care who you are now and who we might become together." Wade stood very still, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning hope. "I've wanted to kiss you since the day we raised the roof beam," he admitted quietly. "Standing there watching you hammer nails with such determination, I thought my heart might burst from wanting." "Then why didn't you?" Willow whispered. "Because once I started, I wasn't sure I'd be able to stop." The honesty of his confession stole Willow's breath. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm not asking you to stop." With a groan, Wade closed the distance between them, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened as years of loneliness and weeks of growing attraction ignited between them. Willow wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer as his hands spanned her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground in his eagerness. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I've been half in love with you since I found you kneeling in the ashes of your home," he confessed. "Completely in love with you since the day you insisted on helping to raise your own roof beams. And I've been falling in love with you one sunrise at a time," Willow replied, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "Through every nail hammered, every log notched, every quiet moment watching the sunset from my new porch." Wade kissed her again, more softly this time, a promise rather than a passion. "We should go back inside before they send out a search party," he said reluctantly. Willow nodded, but neither of them moved to leave the privacy of the porch and the magic of the moment they had created. Instead, Wade took her hand and led her to the wooden bench that stood against the wall of the house. "I want to tell you something," he said as they sat, still holding hands. "Something I've never told anyone else, not even Samuel." Willow squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I'm listening." Wade stared out into the darkness, gathering his thoughts. "My real name is William Everlie," he began. "I was born in St. Louis to a banker and his wife, educated, comfortable, destined for a respectable life following in my father's footsteps." He gave a humorless laugh. "I hated every minute of it. When I was 19, I ran away, headed west with romantic notions of adventure." Willow remained silent, giving him space to continue his story at his own pace. "Found adventure, all right," Wade or William continued. "And trouble. Fell in with a gang led by a man named Blackwell in Texas. At first it was just petty theft, minor cons. Then it got worse. His voice dropped. We robbed a bank in El Paso. It was supposed to be simple in and out, no one gets hurt. But Blackwell shot the teller, killed him for no reason other than he could. Willow gasped softly, but Wade pressed on, as if afraid he'd lose his courage if he stopped. I wanted out after that, but Blackwell wouldn't let me go. Said I knew too much. We moved north, hitting small towns along the way. In New Mexico, we robbed a stagecoach. I was the lookout, wasn't even there when it happened, but a woman was killed. The law caught up with us a week later. There was a shootout. I took a bullet in the shoulder, but I got away. The others weren't so lucky. He turned to look at Willow, his eyes pleading for understanding. I rode without stopping until my horse nearly collapsed beneath me. Ended up here in Arizona territory with nothing but guilt and the clothes on my back. Samuel Thornton took one look at me and knew I was running from something, but he offered me work anyway. Said everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to earn it. And you were willing, Willow said softly. Wade nodded. More than willing. I buried William Everly and became Wade Evans, a man determined to atone for his past through honest work and helping others. I've been sending money to the family of that woman from the stagecoach for years. It doesn't bring her back, but... His voice trailed off. Willow reached up to touch his face, turning it gently toward her. The man I've come to know, Wade or William, it doesn't matter, is a good man. A man who saw a stranger in need and didn't hesitate to help. A man who works with integrity and speaks with honesty. A man I trust with my heart. Wade's eyes glistened in the low light. I don't deserve you, Willow Reed. Love isn't about deserving, Willow replied. It's about choosing. And I choose you, Wade Evans, past and all. They kissed again, sealing the truth they had shared between them. When they finally returned to the party, hand in hand, the knowing smiles that greeted them suggested that their absence had not gone unnoticed. But Willow found she didn't care. She had lost everything in the fire, but in the ashes, she had found something far more precious than possessions. She had found love with a man who understood what it meant to start again. As winter settled over Jerome, Willow's new life took shape. Her cabin, though smaller than her family home, was cozy and well-built, easily withstanding the occasional desert snowfall. The cattle thrived in their temporary enclosure, and plans for a proper barn and expanded corrals were underway for the spring building season. Wade continued to work at the Elkhorn Ranch, but he spent every evening and his days off at Willow's place, helping with chores and simply enjoying her company. Their courtship was unconventional by the standards of Jerome society, too much time alone. Too little chaperoning, but the town's gossips seemed willing to overlook propriety in light of the circumstances. Martha Thornton, however, was not so easily placated. 3 weeks after the celebration at Elkhorn, she arrived at Willow's cabin unannounced, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. It's not right. A young woman living out here alone with a man visiting at all hours, she declared, settling herself at Willow's small kitchen table. People are talking. Willow poured coffee for her visitor, hiding a smile. People always talk, Mrs. Thornton. And I'm hardly alone. Sheriff Patterson rides out every few days to check on me, and half the town seems to find excuses to visit regularly. That's not the same, and you know it, Martha said firmly. Wade is here every evening and most mornings. I know he's been a tremendous help to you, dear, and Samuel thinks the world of him, but there are proprieties to be observed. Willow sat across from Martha, considering her words. She knew the older woman meant well and was genuinely concerned for her reputation. What would you suggest, Mrs. Thornton? That Wade stop helping me? That I refuse his company? Martha sighed, her expression softening. No, child. I'm suggesting that if you two care for each other as much as is obvious to anyone with eyes, perhaps you should consider marriage." Willow nearly choked on her coffee. "Marriage? Don't look so shocked," Martha said dryly. "It's the natural conclusion to a courtship, which is what you and Wade have been engaged in whether you've named it or not." Willow felt her cheeks grow warm. The truth was, she had thought about marriage, had imagined a future with Wade by her side, building a life together on her land. But they had never discussed it explicitly, though their feelings for each other had grown stronger with each passing day. "I don't know if Wade is thinking of marriage," she said carefully. Martha snorted in a most unladylike fashion. "That man looks at you the way Samuel has looked at me for 30 years. Trust me, he's thinking of it. But men sometimes need a nudge in the right direction." After Martha left, her words echoing in Willow's mind, Willow found herself unable to focus on her chores. The idea of marriage to Wade filled her with a joy so intense it was almost frightening. But would he want the same? His past still haunted him. She could see it in his eyes sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. Would he believe himself worthy of the commitment marriage represented? That evening, when Wade arrived after his day's work at Elkhorn, Willow was unusually quiet as they shared the stew she had prepared. Wade noticed her distraction immediately. "Something troubling you?" he asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. Willow hesitated, then decided on directness. "Martha Thornton came to visit today. She's concerned about propriety." Wade's expression clouded. "I see. She thinks I shouldn't be spending so much time here." "Actually, she thinks you should be spending more time here," Willow replied. "As my husband." The spoon Wade had been holding clattered to the table. "She suggested we marry." Willow nodded, watching his face carefully. "She seems to think it's the only proper solution to our situation." Wade was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood abruptly, pacing the small cabin with nervous energy. "Willow, there's nothing I want more than to make a life with you, but marriage, that's not something to enter into because of town gossip or Mrs. Thornton's sense of propriety. Is that what you think I'm suggesting?" Willow asked, hurt coloring her voice. Wade stopped pacing, turning to face her with anguish in his eyes. "No, of course not. But I need you to be sure, really sure, that this is what you want. I'm still a wanted man in Texas and New Mexico. If my past ever catches up with me, it would affect you too. And I'm still just a ranch hand with little to offer beyond my labor and my heart." Willow rose from her chair and crossed to him, taking his face between her hands. "Listen to me, Wade Evans. I don't care about your past or what name you were born with. I care about the man who stands before me now, the man who saw possibility in ashes, who worked alongside me to build a new life, who has shown me what it means to love and be loved in return." She smiled up at him. "As for being a ranch hand, I happen to be in need of a permanent foreman for my cattle operation. The position comes with room and board, and the rancher's heart, if you want it." Wade's expression transformed from anguish to wonder. "Are you proposing to me, Willow Reed?" "I believe I am," Willow replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "What do you say, Wade Evans? Will you marry me and help me build the ranch my father dreamed of, the ranch we can build together?" Wade's answer came in the form of a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath coming in quick gasps. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Willow Reed, though I should be the one asking." Willow laughed, joy bubbling up from deep within her. "You can ask me tomorrow if it makes you feel better. My answer will be the same." True to his word, Wade proposed formally the next day. He had ridden into town early and returned with a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but solid and enduring. like the love they had found amid the ruins of Willow's former life. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Jerome, with Samuel Thornton standing as Wade's best man and Rebecca Patterson as Willow's matron of honor. The entire town turned out for the celebration that followed, a testament to the community that had embraced them both. As spring arrived in the Arizona Territory, bringing new growth to the desert landscape, Willow and Wade began expanding their operations. With the help of the community, they raised a sturdy barn and expanded their corrals. Wade's experience with cattle proved invaluable as they increased their herd through careful breeding and smart purchases. By summer, the Reed Evans Ranch, as it came to be known, though legally the land remained in Willow's name, was becoming one of the more promising operations in the area. Wade had a natural eye for good breeding stock, and Willow's head for business ensured that they made smart decisions about when to buy and sell. Their cabin, too, grew with their success. They added a second room and a proper kitchen, using some of the profits from their first cattle sale. Willow planted a garden that thrived under her care, providing fresh vegetables for their table and enough extra to share with neighbors. On the anniversary of the fire that had changed her life, Willow sat on the porch of her home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange, and read that once would have reminded her only of destruction, but now spoke to her of beauty and renewal. Wade joined her, settling onto the bench beside her and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Evans." Willow leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "I was thinking about how strange life can be. A year ago today, I thought I'd lost everything. I couldn't imagine how I'd ever rebuild from such complete destruction." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with love and contentment. "I never dreamed that in losing everything, I'd find so much more." Wade brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. "When I rode up to your burning homestead that night and saw you kneeling in the ashes, I knew I'd do anything to help you rebuild. What I didn't know was that in helping you find your strength, I'd find my redemption." "We rebuilt each other," Willow said softly. "With what was left," Wade agreed, echoing the words he'd spoken on that fateful night. "And look what we've created." He gestured toward their property, the thriving garden, the solid barn, the expanded corrals where their cattle grazed peacefully. But Willow knew he meant more than just the physical manifestations of their work. He meant the life they had built together, the love that had grown from the ashes of her loss and his past. "It's more than I ever dared hope for," she admitted. Wade's expression grew serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you, something that might change things." Willow felt a flicker of alarm at his tone. "What is it?" "I received a letter last week from the governor of New Mexico Territory," Wade said slowly. "Samuel's brother works in the territorial office, and he's been making inquiries on my behalf. It seems the witnesses to the stagecoach robbery have recanted their identification of me as one of the gang. And with Blackwell and the others dead, there's no one to contradict their new testimony." Willow's heart raced. "What does that mean?" "It means the charges against William Everly have been dropped," Wade said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm no longer a wanted man. I'm free, Willow, truly free for the first time in 5 years." Joy surged through Willow as she threw her arms around him. "That's wonderful news. Oh, Wade, I'm so happy for you." Wade held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "It means I can be the husband you deserve, a man without shadows, without the fear of the past catching up to us." "You've always been the husband I deserve," Willow insisted. "But I'm glad you can finally put that fear to rest." They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. Finally, Wade cleared his throat. "There's something else I've been wanting to discuss with you," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I've been thinking about our future, about family." Willow's breath caught. They had talked in vague terms about children someday, but had agreed to focus on establishing their ranch first. "I think it's time we started thinking about expanding our family," Wade continued. "If you're ready, that is." Willow felt a surge of tenderness at his uncertain expression. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said softly. "In fact, I've been meaning to tell you something too." Wade raised an eyebrow in question. "I visited Dr. Miller in town last week," Willow said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "It seems our family is already expanding. We're going to have a baby, Wade, in the spring." Wade stared at her in stunned silence before a slow, radiant smile spread across his face. "A baby," he whispered, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Our baby," Willow confirmed, covering his hand with her own. "Another new beginning." Wade gathered her close, his joy palpable in the strength of his embrace. "From the ashes," he murmured against her hair. With what was left, Willow completed the thought that had become their shared promise, a reminder of how far they had come and the love that had made it possible. As night settled fully over the Arizona territory, Willow and Wade remained on their porch, talking quietly of their hopes for their child and their future together. The home they had built stood solid behind them, a testament to their resilience and determination. The land stretched out before them, rich with possibility and promise. Willow knew that life would continue to bring challenges, drought and harsh winters, the difficulties of ranching in an unforgiving land, the everyday trials of marriage and parenthood. But she also knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together, with the same strength and love that had allowed them to build a life from the ashes of destruction. In the end, she had not just recovered what was lost in the fire, she had discovered something far more precious: the capacity to begin again, to create something new and beautiful from the ruins of the past. And in Wade Evans, she had found a partner who understood that journey intimately, who had walked his own path of redemption and renewal. As the stars wheeled overhead, marking the passage of time in their eternal dance, Willow Reed Evans offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the fire that had seemed like an ending, but had proven to be just the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life. 5 years later, the Reed Evans Ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the Jerome area. Their herd had tripled in size, requiring additional hands during the busy seasons. The original cabin had been expanded into a comfortable home that echoed with the laughter of their children, 4-year-old Samuel, named for the man who had given Wade his second chance, and 2-year-old Elizabeth, named for Willow's mother. On a warm summer evening, Willow stood on the porch of their home, watching Wade teach Samuel how to gentle a young colt in the corral nearby. Elizabeth sat on her hip, babbling happily as she played with Willow's hair. The ranch bore little resemblance to the homestead Willow had lost in the fire years ago. The buildings were different, positioned according to Wade's efficient design rather than the somewhat haphazard arrangement her father had established. The cattle were a different breed, hardier and better suited to the Arizona climate. Even the garden followed a new pattern, incorporating knowledge Willow had gained through years of trial and error. Yet for all these differences, the spirit of the place remained true to what her parents had envisioned: a place where hard work and determination could carve a good life from the demanding landscape of the West. A place where family could thrive and community could gather. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in the familiar colors of dusk, Willow reflected on how completely her life had been transformed by what had seemed, at the time, to be the worst night of her existence. The fire that had destroyed her home had also set her on a path to a happiness she could never have imagined. Wade looked up from his lesson with Samuel and caught Willow's eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after all these years, conveyed all the love and contentment that filled their shared life. He whispered something to their son, then lifted the boy onto his shoulders and headed toward the house. "Mama," Samuel called excitedly as they approached. "Papa says I can help with the roundup this fall. Did he now?" Willow replied, raising an eyebrow at her husband. "And what else did Papa say?" "That I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory," Wade answered, leaning in to kiss her cheek while Elizabeth giggled and reached for his hat. "And that we should all go inside for supper before these little cowpokes start grazing on the furniture." As they gathered around the table in the home they had built together, sharing the meal Willow had prepared and recounting the small adventures of their day, Willow felt a sense of completeness that transcended mere happiness. This was fulfillment, the deep satisfaction of a life richly lived, of love freely given and received, of challenges met and overcome together. They had indeed started again with what was left, just as Wade had promised on that terrible night so long ago. And what they had created from those ashes was more beautiful and enduring than anything Willow could have built alone. In the end, she hadn't lost everything in the fire. She had found everything that truly mattered.